It is a morning like any other. The year is 1438, and the boy is already awake. He doesn't have a name in our story because he could be anyone. A peasant's son, a baker's apprentice, maybe even the child of a minor noble sent here for discipline. But in the eyes of the master, they are all the same. He sleeps on a straw mattress laid across wooden planks. The air is damp. His blanket, woven from coarse wool, offers little warmth. There is no fire, just the smell of ash from last night's embers. He doesn't open his eyes because he's rested. He opens them because he must. The sound that pulls him from sleep is distant but absolute. The chapel bell. It is not just a sound. It is a command. Cold feet, colder silence. The boy dresses quickly, threadbare tunic, worn hose, a pair of leather shoes tied with twine. His fingers fumble with a belt made from knotted rope. His feet are stiff. His breath fogs the air. There is no breakfast, no warmth, no words. Not because he's forbidden to speak yet, but because there's nothing to say. Everyone in the house already knows what the day will be. He slips out the wooden door, its iron latch cold in his hand. Outside, the village is still wrapped in silence. Smoke rises lazily from a few chimneys. Chickens scratch at the frost. A dog barks once, then settles. His mother watches him go. She doesn't wave. She just shuts the door. The long walk to obedience. The road to school is not long, but it feels that way. It winds through mud and cobblestone, past frozen ditches and bare trees. The sun hasn't fully risen. The sky is a blanket of dull gray, the kind of color that never turns to blue. On his back is a satchel. Inside, a wax tablet, a stylus, a piece of chalk wrapped in cloth. No books. Books are too precious, too rare. Even the master only owns a few. He passes the blacksmith's forge, still dark. He hears the distant creak of a cartwheel. Then the silence swallows everything again. The school appears. At last, the building appears, part chapel, part schoolroom, its stone walls streaked with moss and soot. The windows are thin slits of horn, not glass. The door is oak, weather-warped and iron-rimmed. A small bell hangs above the entrance, motionless. He is not the first to arrive. A few other boys stand silently outside. No one laughs. No one plays. To be early is safer. To be late is dangerous. Morning prayers. The door creaks open. A figure emerges, the schoolmaster in a black robe and high collar, holding a staff not much thinner than a broomstick. He does not speak. He only steps aside. The boys enter one by one, bowing slightly at the threshold. Inside is cold stone and wood, benches without backs, a large crucifix, and at the far end, an altar with a single candle burning. They kneel and they pray, not in English, not in French, in Latin. Pater noster, qui es in caelis. The words are repeated in unison, quietly, carefully. Mistakes here are not just wrong. They are disrespectful. Some boys don't fully know what they're saying, but they say it anyway, because to pray properly is part of being a good student. And being a good student is the only protection from the master's rod. The day begins. After prayers, they rise. The schoolmaster clears his throat once, a signal. The day has begun. No bell rings, no clock ticks. Time is not kept with numbers, but with rituals. The master points to a boy. The boy steps forward and recites a Latin phrase from memory. Another boy stumbles. He hesitates on the third word, and the room goes still. The master raises an eyebrow. No one breathes. The rod does not come down. Not yet, but it will. The students open their tablets. The scratching of styluses begins. and the long, brutal silence of learning stretches forward like a road with no end. The door closes behind them with a dull wooden thud. This is the room where their minds will be molded, bent, and at times broken. The medieval grammar school is not designed for comfort. It is not meant to inspire joy. It is not a place for questions, curiosity, or laughter. It is a place for discipline, obedience, and Latin. A room without warmth. The walls are made of stone, not smoothed or decorated, just rough, gray, and cold to the touch. The only furniture consists of long wooden benches without backs, splintered at the edges, and low tables carved with initials from generations of bored or desperate boys. In one corner, a bucket for slop water. In another, a faded painting of Saint Jerome, the patron saint of learning, gazing sternly down with a skull in his hand. There are no maps, no diagrams, no chalkboard, only scrolls, slates, and a single locked chest behind the master's table, holding the school's precious few manuscripts. The boys sit, not by age, but by skill. The youngest, or those struggling most, sit near the front, where the rod can reach them faster. The schoolmaster, he enters slowly. The schoolmaster, draped in a long black gown, his face weathered, his fingers ink-stained, his eyes sharp beneath heavy lids. He does not smile. He does not explain. He carries no lesson plan, no book under his arm. He doesn't need one. He knows the material by heart, as any respectable schoolman of his time should. In his right hand is a rod, a long stick of birch or ash, smooth from use, wrapped with a leather grip at the handle. Its presence is constant, a reminder, a promise. The structure of a school day. There is no bell to ring each period. There are no subjects as we know them now. Instead, the day follows a rigid pattern: morning prayers, Latin grammar drills, recitations from memory, copying from texts, psalms and religious instruction, midday meal, catechism and moral lessons, final prayers and dismissal. The language of learning is not the local tongue, but Latin, the language of the church, the law, and the university. Even the youngest boys are expected to memorize and repeat full Latin phrases by the end of their first week. Mistakes are punished, not later, immediately. Learning without understanding. The schoolmaster speaks coniugatio tertia, lego, legis, legit. The boys repeat it, murmuring in uneven rhythm. The words echo strangely in the stone room. One of them, small for his age, gets it wrong. He replaces the wrong ending, a soft ham, where there should be an it. The master does not shout. He simply raises the rod and taps it once on the edge of the table. The boy stands. He walks forward. He holds out his hand. 3 strikes, swift, sharp, deliberate. The boy returns to his seat. No one reacts, because no one is surprised. The purpose of pain. Modern education seeks to engage the mind, but in the 1400s, education is about shaping the soul. To learn is to submit. To remember is to repeat. To think critically is dangerous, even blasphemous. The rod is not just a tool, it is part of the lesson. It reminds the student of his place, of the cost of ignorance, of the pain of failure. Even if he understands nothing, the pain will help him remember. Silence is safety. No one speaks unless addressed. No one asks questions. To ask is to challenge, and to challenge is to presume. Every sound in the room is measured, the scratch of styluses on slate, the quiet drone of memorized prayers, the occasional sniffle, and the steps of the schoolmaster as he walks between the rows. Sometimes he stops behind a boy. Sometimes he says nothing. That is worse than being struck. because then the boy must sit perfectly still, knowing that at any moment the master's judgment may fall. A long day ahead. This is just the beginning. The sun is not yet high. The air in the room grows colder as the boys sit, motionless, chanting their conjugations. Outside, the village begins to stir. Merchants and farmers and animals coming to life. But in here, there is only the sound of ancient words spoken by young voices, and the ever-present shadow of the rod. This is how a child learns to survive school in the 1400s. Not by thinking, not by dreaming, but by enduring. Amo, amas, amat, amamus, amatis, amont. It is not just repetition, it is ritual. In the 1400s, a schoolboy's education does not revolve around creativity or critical thinking. It revolves around memory, mastery of form, and, most of all, Latin. Latin is not just a language, it is a passport. To the church, to the law, to the university, to power. To speak it fluently is to belong to the learned world. To fail is to remain common, unlettered, left behind. The primer, Donatus and Doctrina. The master begins the lesson with a worn and dog-eared manuscript, likely copied by hand, its edges rubbed smooth by decades of use. The text? Donatus's Ars Minor, a 4th century Latin grammar book that has become the foundation of learning for nearly 1,000 years. The boys are told the rule, then they recite the rule, then they copy the rule, then they memorize the rule. Nomen est pars orationis. A noun is a part of speech. They chant, they mumble, they stumble. Each time they do, the master clears his throat, a warning. The rod remains in view, learning by echo. The master calls name. The boy stands. The room waits. The master recites a line from a prayer or grammar. The boy must repeat it exactly, not only the words, but the intonation, the breath, the speed. If he gets it wrong, there is no second chance. He will be punished, and another boy will be called to recite it better. Learning is public. Correction is physical. Shame is a tool. And yet, in this slow, punishing way, boys learn. Not all, but some. Understanding versus repetition. Does the boy understand what he's saying? Not always. A child of 7 may be able to recite Psalm 51 in Latin without knowing what the words mean. Understanding comes later, if ever. In this world, knowing the rules is more important than grasping the meaning behind them. To question is to doubt. To doubt is to sin. What matters is that the prayer is spoken cleanly. The grammar rule recited with confidence. The lesson obeyed. The tools of the day. Each student uses a wax tablet, a stylus, and a chalk slate for practice. Ink and paper are precious, reserved for those advanced enough to use them properly. A mistake on parchment is not easily erased. They copy Latin phrases, conjugation tables, psalms, and biblical lines. Some schools are lucky enough to have access to a horn book, a wooden paddle with a printed sheet of lessons covered by a thin sheet of horn to protect it. The alphabet, the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments, the basics taught over and over like waves breaking on the same stretch of shore. Learning for God, and always behind every lesson stands the church. Latin is the language of the Bible, of the Mass, of theology and law. To learn Latin is not just to gain knowledge, it is to approach holiness. Some boys will become monks, others will become priests. Some will become scribes or scholars. But even those who become nothing more than a shopkeeper or farmer's son will carry with them the ghost of these lessons, etched into the mind by repetition, by fear, and by time. The Master's voice, The schoolmaster speaks again. He does not shout. He does not plead. He simply states, and the boys obey. He moves between them, pointing at lines of copied text. He notices a smudge, too much pressure from the stylus. He notices a missed accent, sloppy penmanship. He raps the table with his rod. The boy corrects the mistake. No eye contact, no complaint. It is not cruelty. It is normal. This is not a place of emotional development. It is a factory of form and function. Time passes slowly. The sun continues to rise. The walls stay cold. The boys continue to chant. Some rub their eyes. Some fight yawns. But no one dares to sleep. Not here, not now, not in this world of rules, rhyme, rhythm, and relentless routine. They do not yet understand what they are becoming. But the lessons are shaping them. Word by word, line by line, strike by strike. The morning lessons are over. The voices of the boys, once stiff and rhythmic, go quiet. The master closes the worn Latin text and extinguishes a candle with his fingers. And though no bell rings inside these walls, there is a faint sound from beyond them. A church bell, far off, slow and resonant. It means one thing: midday, the only moment of the day when the boys are allowed to breathe, the meal of the day. The boys file out in silence, not with joy, never joy, but with a kind of restrained relief. Some carry small cloth pouches, others hold nothing. There is no dining hall, no prepared meal, no tables lined with steaming dishes. The midday meal is humble. Bread, a small wedge of cheese, maybe a bit of salted fish if the family was lucky the night before. Most eat seated on the stone steps of the schoolhouse or gathered near the chapel wall, backs against the cold. There is no chatter. Speaking out of turn even now is dangerous. The master sometimes walks among them during this break, watching. Sometimes he eats nothing at all. He does not need food to be feared. A moment of stillness. This break, 20 or 30 minutes at most, is the only time the boys feel the wind on their skin, see the open sky, or hear the world beyond their recitations. A dog trots past. A crow lands on a roof beam. Somewhere down the road, a cart rumbles by, wooden wheels groaning. It is not freedom, but it is something close to it. The boys eat quickly, efficiently. Food is not to be savored. It is fuel. And they know what comes next. Because midday is not just about eating, it is about purifying. Back to the chapel. After the meal, they return, not to the schoolroom, but to the chapel. This small adjoining room, colder than the classroom, darker and heavier with silence, is where the boys come face to face with the part of their education that shapes not just the mind, but the soul. The schoolmaster is not the only authority here. A cleric often leads this next part, or the master himself dons a different tone, less instructor, more shepherd. The chapel smells of wax and damp stone. The crucifix looms over the altar. Candles flicker, casting tall shadows that dance like silent witnesses to each boy's thoughts. They kneel again, and then comes the most private act of the day, performed in public. Confession as curriculum. Each boy is called, one by one, to confess, not to a priest behind a curtain, but before a cleric or teacher seated in a tall-backed chair, with the others waiting, listening behind. The sins are small, often vague. I spoke without permission. I thought ill of my father. I doubted my lessons. I was slow to learn. I dreamt during prayer. They are not punished here, not physically. But the memory of the morning's rod is never far. The shame of confession is its own discipline. The boys do not confess to grow. They confess to cleanse, to reset, to re-enter the afternoon with a lighter heart and, perhaps, a stronger spine. Moral instruction. After confession, they recite catechisms, not just what they did wrong, but what they must believe. The Apostles' Creed, the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments, the 7 deadly sins, the 4 cardinal virtues, the 4 last things, death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Each recitation is graded in silence. A missed line may bring a glare, a sloppy delivery, a note, a fidget, a threat. The soul, like the mind, must be shaped, smoothed, and disciplined. Between fear and faith, for many of the boys, these rituals do not awaken religious feeling, they awaken habit. They recite not from belief, but from necessity. They pray not for salvation, but for protection, from failure, from pain, from the rod. And yet, somewhere beneath the layers of cold ritual, maybe a few of them begin to wonder. Maybe the repetition settles deeper than expected. Maybe a phrase stays with them, burned into memory, echoing faintly in the heart. Not all education comes with understanding, but sometimes understanding comes quietly, long after the lesson has ended. The day continues, the chapel empties, the boys file out. Their shoes scuff against the stone, their heads stay low. The afternoon lessons will begin soon. They know what's coming. More copying, more repetition, more silence, more discipline. The break is over. The prayers are said. The stomachs are full, barely. And now, the hardest part of the day begins. The midday reprieve is already a memory. The boys take their places again on hard benches. Their backs are straighter now, their eyes more alert, because the afternoon is when the worst punishments tend to fall. Not because the mistakes are greater, but because the master is tired, and his patience is worn thin. The long descent into silence. The next several hours are not filled with the sounds of learning. There is no joyful discussion, no lively debate. Only the scrape of styluses on slate, the occasional sniffle, the hollow clatter of a dropped tablet. Even the church bells seem muted now. Most of the day's work will be copying, line after line, word after word, not for expression, not for beauty, but for precision. The master dictates, "In principio erat verbum." In the beginning was the word. And so the boys copy, eyes squinting, wrists aching, slates smudging, wax melting slightly under their hands. Mistakes are made, and mistakes are punished. The nature of the rod. The schoolmaster's rod, an extension of his voice, has many purposes. A tap on the desk for attention, a smack across fingers for a wrong answer, a whack on the back for a fidget, a full beating on the legs or buttocks for disrespect, daydreaming, or consistent failure. Sometimes the master doesn't raise his voice at all. He just strikes. The rod is not questioned. It is the law. Parents, if they are literate enough to write to the school, seldom complain. Some even expect the master to be firm. To raise a boy without discipline is to raise him for the gallows. The art of copying copywork is more than punishment. It is a ritual of formation. Boys copy. Psalms, Latin grammar rules, moral instructions, biblical excerpts, lists of sins and virtues. Some schools allow students to graduate from slates to parchment and ink, but only the most careful are trusted. Parchment is expensive, ink even more so. One spilled drop could ruin a week's worth of labor. The best students are allowed to illuminate their texts, drawing decorative initials or small symbols in the margins, a leaf, a bird, a sword. These touches are rare and watched closely. Creativity is not encouraged. It is tolerated in very small doses, fighting sleep. As the afternoon drags on, the cold begins to fade, replaced by something worse: exhaustion. The room is still. The boys lean forward, elbows slip, heads droop, eyes flutter. Falling asleep is one of the most serious offenses in the school. It means a swift strike with the rod, followed by public scolding and sometimes extra lines after dismissal. But sometimes a boy does fall asleep, and sometimes the master lets it pass. Not out of kindness, but because it proves a point that no matter how harsh the lesson, the body always breaks before the soul. The quiet terror of school, the harshest part of the school day, isn't the rod, it's the anticipation of the rod, the constant knowing that at any moment you might be called upon, might be wrong, might be punished. Every boy lives in a state of permanent readiness, not to learn, but to endure. Some boys become quiet and quick, internalizing the master's patterns and avoiding notice. Others become rigid with anxiety, their minds too frozen to speak. The fear does not fade. It shapes them, not just for this day, but for many days to come. The time that never moves. The hardest truth for these children is this: there is no end in sight. The days look the same, the rules never change, the master never softens, and so they copy and recite and kneel and obey again and again, hoping for approval, fearing disgrace, and longing for a silence that isn't filled with tension. Some boys thrive under this system, most just survive it. The final hour of the day arrives, not with a bell, but with a feeling, a soft ache behind the eyes, the weight in the shoulders, the way each boy stares, unfocused, at the lines he's copied for the 100th time. The master is quiet now. He walks with slow steps, not because he's tired, though perhaps he is, but because he knows his presence is enough. Even his silence is a tool of control. The boys finish their final lines. They set down their slates, they rub sore fingers, but still no one leaves. Not yet. Evening prayers. The last task of the day is also the first. Prayer. They kneel again, knees on cold stone, hands folded, heads low. The chapel candle is relit. Its flame flickers weakly, like a memory trying to hold on. The boys recite, almost whispering now, Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto. The Latin comes not from thought anymore, but from habit, from the way the mouth remembers the shape of the words, even when the mind is numb. The prayers are longer in the evening, a form of protection against dreams, against doubt, against the lingering weight of sin. And when the last Amen is spoken, the spell breaks. The day is done. The walk home. The boys file out once more, quiet, cold, and coated in exhaustion. The air outside is different now, sharper, dimmer. The sun clings to the horizon like a smear of copper on a steel sky. Our nameless boy walks home. Each step is slower than it was that morning. His shoes are muddy, his hands stained with wax and chalk. His stomach is empty again. But he carries something more than tiredness. He carries the day's lessons. Not just the Latin, not just the grammar, but the rhythm, the silence, the structure, and the knowledge that he will wake tomorrow to do it all again. Home, but not rest at home. There is no grand welcome. His mother glances at him, relieved to see no new bruises, perhaps, but says little. His siblings may ask what he learned, but he won't answer. He's too tired, or maybe he knows they wouldn't understand. He eats a little if there's any bread left. He drinks water. Then he lies down on the same straw mattress and stares at the ceiling. Outside, an owl calls once. Far off, the chapel bell rings once more, its final note of the day. And in his mind, the boy hears the master's voice again, reciting a line, a phrase, a rule, a punishment. But among all of it, one phrase remains, something he liked, something beautiful. A line from a psalm. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. He doesn't know exactly what it means, but he remembers it, and that's something, the end of one day, the start of a life. He will go back tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Most boys do not remain in school long, some for only a season, others for a year or two. Only the most gifted or fortunate will continue to study beyond grammar school. Most will become laborers, farmers, soldiers, bakers, fathers. But all of them will remember this place, its cold walls, its old prayers, its fear and its structure, its long days and long silences. They will remember the rod, yes, but also the moment a word finally made sense, the way candlelight made the Latin letters shimmer like gold. And in that strange, quiet, brutal world, they were changed